Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. This is Joe back again. And with me this week, we have
I'm Justin.
And Cody.
just the three of us here this week and pretty excited for this topic. We're going to be talking about the works of Studio Ghibli. I would assume most listeners are probably familiar with them by way of Hayao Miyazaki, who's an Academy Award-winning director of movies such as Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle, My Neighbor Totoro. The studio was actually founded in, I believe, 1985 by Miyazaki and Isao Takahata, who is another legendary animation director. Actually, interesting note there, I just learned today that apparently Takahata was not actually an animator himself. He directed a number of animated films, but he was not really a visual artist or did any of the animation, as opposed to Miyazaki, who started as an artist and, grew into writing and directing his own animated films. Anyway, just like usual, thought it would be good to start by talking about sort of our individual history with the topic, our experiences kind of leading up to this. I know that for this podcast, we all revisited a number of the Studio Ghibli movies. So maybe just talk about your relationship prior to that. And then as we get into the movies, we can talk about, our feelings and impressions of the individual films. Who wants to go first on that?
I have a feeling I'm going to be probably the odd person out here, so I'll go first on this one. So I didn't get into any of these movies until today. No, I'm joking. We got into these the style, I guess, of animation in this workhouse here, Studio Ghibli. Is that how we're saying it? Ghibli, like giblets. Yeah. When my daughter was young, actually, so probably she was maybe 3 or 4, which is probably 7 or 8 years ago. It's probably the first any of these I had seen, and then my family really enjoyed. I don't know if you want to do like a separate section after this of like what makes these films, but just a very different art style, different messaging, different style of a tale than you get with a lot of the American style cartoon movies. Beautiful art style, and some films have more meaning to our family than others, and we can talk about later some connections around the house here too to some of this stuff when the films come up. But yeah, so I'm probably gonna be the person that doesn't chime in with all the super technically behind the scenes detail-y names and pronunciations and things like maybe these other guys will be.
That's okay.
Cody is the least weeby.
It balances us out a bit. And probably the most weeby would be me. I've enjoyed anime ever since I discovered it. My first Ghibli film was, I have a feeling the same as a lot of people, Princess Mononoke, which was the first of their films that really got a lot of attention stateside. It felt like it got theatrical releases. There was a lot of buzz about it. It just seemed like it garnered a lot of attention as being, so different from American animation and something special. So it was like one of the first DVDs I actually owned was Princess Mononoke. And I saw why the studio was so highly regarded, because just the animation quality, the music, the backgrounds, everything was just a step up from almost anything else I had ever seen. And from that point, I over the years I went and exposed dug up other movies that they had done, watched new ones as they came out, and I understand why so many of their films are considered classics or timeless even. There's just something special about the studio. They capture a lot of emotion. They capture a lot of just visual spectacle a lot of the time, and they're lightning in a bottle pretty much most of the time. And I've been a fan ever since Princess Mononoke, really.
I mean, I could pretty much just say exactly what Justin just said. Like that's basically my relationship with them as well. I I've always been an introvert. It will shock everyone to know. And I have always considered myself a bit of a film buff. And I remember, I think it was my freshman year at NMU. I was probably reading a movie website or something and read about this movie that had just come out on DVD, and it was Princess Mononoke. If I'm not mistaken, I think part of the buzz around that was that the English translation that was released was actually overseen by Neil Gaiman, which, you know, kind of caught some extra nerd attention. But yeah, I bought that DVD. I watched the hell out of it. I fell in love with that movie, just the way that Miyazaki, you know, built that whole world. I don't want to get too into it right now because we're going to go movie by movie later, but and then yeah, like Justin said, after that, you know, they basically had me hooked, and I over the years dug up all of their older movies. And I was trying to remember, because I could be mistaken, but I feel like I remember seeing Spirited Away at the Delft at some point in Marquette, which would have had to have been a re-release because it originally came out in 2001, and my memory of it is like a couple years later. But I definitely saw Miyazaki's most recent three movies all like first run when they first came out in theaters. Howl's Moving Castle, Ponyo, and The Wind Rises. And in the past few years, I've gotten to see Princess Mononoke and Spirited Away and My Neighbor Totoro in theatrical re-releases, which, if anyone's not familiar, there's a company called G Kids, which currently has the distribution rights to the Studio Ghibli movies in North America. And every year they do what they call Ghibli Fest, where they'll have a series of screenings. The movies change every year, but they'll show various Studio Ghibli movies in theaters. It's usually, I think, just 2 nights for each movie. But if you know anyone out there is a Ghibli fan and wasn't aware of that, you should check it out. But yeah, I mean, it's like I said, sounds like Justin and I have pretty similar background there. As far as, you know, talking about these movies, we had a little bit of back and forth before we started recording as to the best way to approach this. Ultimately, we are going to be discussing each of our top 5 favorite Studio Ghibli movies, but all of us have seen way more than 5 of these movies, so we thought it might be interesting to kind of go through the entire filmography of the studio. And none of us has seen all of the movies, so there will probably be a few that we might not have much comment on, but we're going to just kind of go through movie by movie and talk about our feelings on those movies.
Talk about your feelings.
Oh, I am going to talk about a lot of feelings during this podcast, just to warn everybody.
All the feelings.
Spoiler alert, I watched one of these movies last night and realized that I literally cried through the entire thing. So it's going to get weird. Anyway.
Literally the entire thing?
I mean, most of it.
Okay.
On and off. It gives me feelings.
That's fair.
But I mean, that's without getting too into that now, that goes back to what Justin was saying, that there are a lot of emotions that are, you know, built into and evoked by these movies. And that's part of what makes Ghibli movies so special. We're actually going to start before Studio Ghibli was officially founded. There were a few movies. Isao Takahata actually directed several movies before Ghibli was officially founded, and Hayao Miyazaki directed 2 feature films. And I think we're going to start just with Miyazaki's pre-Ghibli work. His feature film debut was in 1979 with Castle of Cagliostro. And that's a movie that is based on a manga series, which is based on a character called Lupin, however you want to pronounce it, the third, who is the, I believe, grandson of a legendary French thief, Arsène Lupin. It was not the first movie based on Lupin the Third, but it again was Miyazaki's first movie. It's basically this just crazy heist movie. Have either of you guys seen this one?
I had never actually really watched Lupin the Third, so this is one I never sought out because I figured, well, I should probably be familiar with the source material before
Wrong.
and that's what I've heard. You know, actually, in leading up to doing this episode, I mentioned that to a few other people, and they said the same thing. That no, you don't need to have seen the animated series for Lupin. You don't have to have read the manga. You can just jump in. But
Yeah, I
given
mean,
that
I'm not super familiar. Actually, I think the very first anime movie I ever saw was the first Lupin the Third movie, which is The Mystery of Mamo, I think.
Huh.
I remember when I was a kid randomly catching it on like a UHF channel late at night and being like, what the heck is this? This is not like the cartoons that I'm used to seeing. So that's the only other Lupin thing I've seen, but I have like a weird association with that character because that was, I think, literally like the first anime I ever saw. But you should watch this movie. It rules. It's actually on Netflix. It's I think the only Miyazaki movie that is, because it was not part of the G Kids deal.
Oh, okay.
I will say that the dub on Netflix, which we can talk about sub versus dub if you want, but most of the Ghibli movies have pretty solid dubs because they were done under Disney's kind of purview. So you have a lot of like A-list celebrities doing the voices, and they took a lot of care with that.
Yeah, you got mouse money behind it.
Exactly. Castle of Cagliostro is not one of those movies. The dub is like ridiculous, especially the guy who voices Lupin is just like, it's just silly.
Okay.
It's also weird because the dub that's on Netflix, they refer to him as Wolf, which is, I mean, obviously the translation for Lupin is Wolf.
Okay.
But throughout the entire movie, they just call him Wolf. Anyway, it's a lot of fun though. Like, I mean, even if you watch the silly dub, there are a lot of great action sequences. It's actually a highly influential movie. Supposedly Steven Spielberg is a big fan of it. And I couldn't find any firm confirmation of this, but there are a number of sources that claim that he had cited it as an inspiration for some of the chase scenes in the Indiana Jones movies. Which, I mean, watching it, you can see. And I think it's especially interesting that this is Miyazaki's first feature film because it feels very different from most of his other works. It is a little bit more mature because it's, this kind of gentleman thief character. There aren't as many fantasy elements involved. There are some weird aircraft involved, which is something we will definitely have to talk about over the course of the rest of this episode. But
this just sounds like the Thomas Crown Affair. Is that what it is?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's in that vein. It is kind of the like
got
the
planes,
suave anti-hero, again, gentleman thief character. But yeah, I mean, I would recommend it, if you guys haven't seen it. It's just a lot of fun.
Okay.
His next film, which I think we've all seen, I know Justin and I definitely have, is 1984's Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. And to me, this really feels like a Studio Ghibli movie. And actually the success of this movie, I believe, was responsible for the founding of Studio Ghibli.
Nice.
It really kind of like gave Miyazaki, and I believe Isao Takahata was a producer on it as well.
Okay.
But it kind of gave them the like, cachet in Japan to be like, we're just going to do our own thing now. And this movie, I mean, it really is the first instance of a lot of what will become the hallmarks of Studio Ghibli films. On a basic level, we have a female protagonist, which will become common in most of Miyazaki's movies, especially. We have strong environmental messaging, which is common in most of Miyazaki and also in some of Takahata's work as well. We have, kind of man versus nature elements. We have warnings about sort of the dangers of technology
and war.
and war. And that's, I mean, and that's, I think maybe after we talk about all the movies, we can maybe talk about common themes or as we go.
Sure.
But Miyazaki is a pacifist, and you can see that in pretty much all of his work.
Yeah.
But have we all seen this? Cody, have you seen this one?
I did. This is one of the ones I watched for the first time this week. It's oddly one I've owned for about 8 years, but just we bought so many of them and I never got back to watching all of them. So I watched it for the first time.
Okay.
So, I mean, do we want to like briefly talk about the plot, or do we just want to talk about our feelings?
A basic plot synopsis, I guess, would be good. So this one is set up, it's a post-apocalyptic story where mankind is still around, but the world is very different. There's this creeping, for lack of a better term, forest of fungus that's usually referred to as the Sea of Decay, that is covering a good portion of the globe. It resists most of mankind's attempts to fight it back. And inside live a bunch of these giant insects that have adapted to this new environment, and those are also a huge peril to the continuation of civilization. There are still a few nations out there, but the main story focuses, at least at first, on a smaller community that has found a way to live in balance with the Sea of Decay. Like they happen to live along a coast where the winds are favorable.
Valley of the Wind.
The Valley of the Wind, where the sea currents blow inland and they keep the spores from the Sea of Decay from overtaking their village. So they found a way to sort of live in this little niche and carve out an existence by kind of scavenging from within the sea itself. And things happen where an airship crashes on the outskirts of their village, and it's carrying this ancient artifact, which is like a giant super soldier from or like the embryo of a giant super soldier from the ages past. And there's nations that are fighting over it, and they get caught up in the middle of this conflict that they never wanted to be a part of, and the balance that they had been living in gets shifted forever. It's a really good story, and it turns out it's actually an adaptation of, I think, the first volume and a half, maybe 2 volumes of a 7-volume manga series. So the story continues on past where the movie ends, and I didn't know that.
Which Miyazaki himself actually wrote the manga, which is interesting.
Yeah, which is cool. And it feels like a very well-realized world, because it is. I mean, there is more material there than what we see in the film, but even with what we're presented with, it just feels like this believable, weird, and yet convincing look at what an ecological apocalypse could look like. And yeah, it definitely sets the tone for a lot of movies that would come after it in a lot of ways. But
Cody, what are your general thoughts on it?
I like this one. Like I said, first time I watched it was this week, really, even though we had owned the DVD forever. But a lot of environmental messages here I liked. I did find it a little funny that like the, solitary, peaceful village by the side of the ocean that lived in their quaint backward lives, farming their fields, and really were like the privileged community in the world. And then they're like all upset when like all this shit happens to their village. I mean, even though they were the only ones benefiting from like the wind helping them stay alive. Like if they didn't have that, they'd all be dead mother too.
It's because they're pacifists, because they're not. I mean, so and again, these are themes that we will see come up time and again. I mean, this is
pacifist by the director, but per nature, no, that doesn't make any sense at all.
Well, so I mean, something that we'll see again and again, especially in Miyazaki's movies, are these sort of idyllic situations that are disrupted by the looming threat of war.
Right.
And I mean, that is almost entirely because of Miyazaki's own experience and feelings around World War II. I mean, as we said, he's a pacifist. He has said repeatedly that he felt like basically Japan's involvement in World War II was a mistake and like led to a lot of terrible things for the nation.
Oh, really?
And I think if you if you kind of think about a lot of his works in the context of allegories for World War II and post World War II, like that's where a lot of these things kind of come from.
Now it totally makes sense from like a inspirational choice and why it was chosen for that way. I'm just saying geographically and economically, it's a little funny within the context of the film.
It's a fantasy movie for kids, Cody.
They're like, don't ruin our world. When only
it's because they have learned to live in harmony with nature. I mean,
no, it's because they are on the windward side of the continent. That has nothing to do with it. If they lived on the other side, they'd be screwed because all the spores would be blowing at them instead of away from them.
Cody, settle down. Simmer down now. It does go further than that, though, because like Nausicaa, the main character, has a way like there are these giant bugs that will attack people if they're upset, and Nausicaa knows how to like interact with them and like calm them down. She has charms and things like that. Where
and like this like not quite a whistle, but like a thing on the end of a string that she can spin, and it makes a noise that kind of,
so like they're trying to live peacefully in this world, and even peacefully, that the Hummer. They're trying to keep peace with the natural world, even like these mutated bugs, whereas the other kingdoms are warlike and, they keep getting themselves in trouble by trying to like shoot these things and making things worse. And so, I don't think it's just because of they happen to have a prime location by the sea.
I hear you saying they have a prime location by the sea, but continue on.
I'm just saying.
They built from that to have a more holistic approach to how they live their lives. They
wouldn't have done on the opposite side of the continent because they would have all been dead a long time ago. Anyway, this is a small point we're going on.
Anyway, it's a good movie. I like it quite a bit.
Yeah. That being said, it was a good movie. I did enjoy it quite a bit.
A little foreshadowing here, but I personally think that maybe a very similar version of this story was done a little bit better down the line, but we can get to that later.
I'm surprised this movie didn't have a castle in it. Really could use a castle.
Speaking of castles, Cody. Actually, it's funny because I realized while we were doing this that Miyazaki does kind of have a thing for castles, because you've got Castle of Cagliostro.
Yes.
You've got Howl's Moving Castle, which we'll get to eventually. Yeah. And you have his next feature film, 1986's Castle in the Sky.
A whole lot of castles.
It's about a castle in the sky. Have all of us seen this one?
Yes.
All right. So brief rundown. Actually, interesting side note. The original title of the movie was Laputa: Castle in the Sky. And in the movie, the titular castle in the sky is called Laputa. Apparently that was dropped from international releases because they were afraid that people might take the title as meaning something a little unsavory in certain languages. Anyway,
wasn't Laputa also like a nation that Gulliver went to in Gulliver's Travels? I know there was Lilliput, but I thought there was also Laputa.
I think that's Laputa.
Laputa, okay,
very close.
Possible, though. Pretty similar.
Okay. Yeah, Laputa.
But this is another one that features a lot of the classic Miyazaki tropes. This is a film. I'm just going to kind of long story short this. The main character is this young lad who encounters a young lass who falls from the sky, and she has this glowing blue pendant around her neck that seems to enable her to float. And over the course of the film, they discover that she is, so the boy's father was some sort of, I forget if he was an explorer or an archaeologist or something.
Yeah, something like that.
But there's this mythical kingdom in the sky, a floating kingdom. And the boy's father claimed to have found it at one point, and everyone thought that he was crazy or making it up. So the boy kind of has his life goal is to like prove that this castle exists. He finds this girl who falls from the sky, and they learn that she is from this castle. She is actually descended from the royal family of Laputa, and she's being pursued by some evil forces. Again, it's like a military force because military bad. And in the climax of the movie, they all end up, spoiler alert, finding Laputa, this legendary castle of the sky. There's a lot of abandoned technology there. There are these like robotic, basically housekeepers and like warriors. But I mean, it's interesting to me because in the years since humans have left or died off or whatever from Laputa, these robots who originally like servants and warriors have basically learned to live in peace with nature, and they're like taking care of birds and animals and like growing flowers. So you see this kind of balance between nature and technology, which you really don't see too often in Miyazaki's works.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's a villain, things go bad, they have a fight, man versus technology versus nature. This is kind of lower tier Miyazaki for me. So if either of you guys has like a fondness for this and wants to add anything, jump in. But
yeah, to this day, I'm not sure I've ever seen this movie in its entirety. I know I've seen parts of it, and I know I've seen some parts multiple times. I don't know if I've ever actually seen it from beginning to end. But from what I've seen, I do agree it's not a bad film, but
no.
But I don't think it's one of their best.
I generally feel like Studio Ghibli, the way that I feel about, beloved franchises where the worst Studio Ghibli movie is still probably better than like 90% of other movies. I mean, even when I say this is lower tier, like it's still an enjoyable movie. It's just, I don't think it's, anywhere near the top 10, let alone my top 5. I will say that the dub of this features Mark Hamill as the voice of the villain. And he is like, he's basically just like borderline Joker mode, like just going for it. So it's kind of fun just in that regard.
That's fair.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's like super noteworthy here. Cody, what do you think about it?
Yeah, I like this one a lot. This is another one we had on DVD a long time now. And Pazu, the main guy here you're talking about is pretty likable guy. You didn't mention the lovable pirate crew that they shack up with as the movie goes on.
Yeah, because air pirates are another kind of recurring thing that we see. And I mean, again, we get airplanes, air pirates. Miyazaki has a lifelong love of aviation. Also, speaking of Pazu, it is James Vander Creek himself.
Yes, and
Mr. Dawson.
I will be talking more about the dubs tonight, and it's impressive because he is mostly, to my knowledge, firstly known for what's the TV Dawson's Creek you just said, right?
Yes.
But this is way back in 1986. Here he is in Castle in the Sky, right? That's how that works, right, guys?
No, Cody.
Right? Isn't that because he sounded so mature then too? But
like 20 years later,
he's had that deep voice his whole life.
I mean, he does sound like
I don't want your life.
He does have a kind of high-pitched childlike voice in the movie.
That's fair.
There's actually it's I was trying to figure out if he's actually doing that or if they like pitched altered like the audio or something like to make him sound younger.
You doubt the Dawson? I'm offended.
I don't, but
he could pull that off. Actually, all of the characters, including your precious Mark Hamill, were all done by James Van Der Beek. So what do you think of that now?
I mean, that's impressive. Get him to do more things.
Right?
I mean, without like tipping your hand, you said you really like this one. I mean, do you like really like this one, Cody?
This is in my so I've only seen 13 of the films, but this would be probably in my top half, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think we counted. So I think there are 20. I think there are 24 that we're going to be talking about, which includes the 2 pre-Ghibli ones. Which actually, I don't know if I mentioned, but Castle in the Sky is actually the first Studio Ghibli movie, so we're firmly into like actual Ghibli territory now. But I think including Castle of Cagliostro and Nausicaa, there are 24.
Sounds right, because I think there were 22 when I looked earlier. So
and I think there are only 6 that I hadn't seen going into that.
Although I think the 22 may count the 2023 film on this list. I'm not sure.
Ooh.
But anyone else have anything to say about Castle in the Sky right now?
No, good visuals.
Yeah, and I mean
this one. I think also it's not really a high quality mark or anything of that nature, but I think maybe of all the ones that I've seen, at least this is probably the one that is the most like could directly be ported into a video game.
That's true.
And it would be fun. Like, it just seems like we need to get to the city and there's air pirates and there's a military and oh my God, we found it.
Fair.
I mean, Justin, you mentioned the visuals. This is like the first one for me where something that I'll talk about is something that's always attracted me to Miyazaki's work are his landscapes and these like idyllic settings.
Yeah.
His use of green for like grass and plants and everything, like it's just, I don't know, it just does something for me. And this is really like the first of his movies where we start to see that. When we get to Laputa, you know, it is just very lush and green and overflowing with plant lives. And it's like literally built on like a giant tree. So this is where we get to see, I mean, you know, Nausicaa deals with like humans versus nature, but it's kind of post-apocalyptic, you know, everything's destroyed.
Yeah.
And this is really where we first get to see like what I would imagine is Miyazaki's idealized version of what nature could look like.
I can see that.
Did you guys notice that Laputa didn't come to life until James Van Der Beek arrived? Facts.
I mean, does anyone truly come to life until James Van Der Beek arrives?
Just Jason Biggs.
I don't want to wait for my life to be over.
Gotta go now. Yeah,
that's how that goes, right?
That is how that goes. Don't act like you didn't have
anyway,
that
let's get sad.
This is gonna take us 9 years at this rate. All right.
Let's get sad, guys.
Okay.
So actually, so that's 1986 Castle in the Sky. In 1988, something that is still absolutely batshit to me occurs.
You read the same thing I read.
I mean, I didn't read it. This is something that I've known for a very long time. So we're gonna have Isao Takahata's first film coming up here, and another Hayao Miyazaki film, because in 1988 in Japan we get a double feature consisting of Isao Takahata's Grave of the Fireflies and Hayao Miyazaki's My Neighbor Totoro. Two movies that have very similar tones.
I can only hope half the theaters played one first and the other half played the other first.
I believe I've tried to research that and it's hard to really pinpoint it, but from what I've read, I believe they showed them in the wrong order. I believe they showed Grave of the Fireflies second. I believe they showed Totoro first and then Grave of the Fireflies second.
I don't even know that is much better. That's just such a cheese.
Well, at least if you do it the other way around, you can maybe have a smile on your face at the end.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe the half your audience that has to slit their wrists by the time it's done.
Well, let's talk about talk about them in the order they should have been released, and let's get real sad and talk about Takahata's Grave of the Fireflies.
Okay.
This is one that I've seen this movie once. It was over 10 years ago. It is a fantastic, like, just amazing motion picture. I could not bring myself to watch it again. So I'm going to defer to one of you gentlemen to kind of give us an overview.
My first exposure to it was a bit more recent than that. I probably maybe 5-6 years ago. And similarly, I would have a very hard time sitting through it again. It's a period piece, and it's one of the most grounded in reality of the Ghibli films that we have to look through. And it's also one of the most depressing, in case the lead into this hadn't given that away. Cody, I think you've seen it the most recently. Did you?
Yesterday.
Yeah. Did you want to take point with how fresh it is, or did you want me to do the heavy lifting on this?
I can talk. I mean, it's fine. So it's funny because I had actually been researching films to show for World War II for school for my class this year, and this popped up on a few different sites as recommendation for a film to show us. I had already wanted to see it for that, and then when we decided to do this podcast episode, it kind of fit in well as a reason for me to finally watch the thing, which I've meant to for a long time as well. It's pretty killer, no pun intended there really, but to watch and get all the way through this, the story of the brother sister, and I watched it with my daughter here with me. She did not enjoy the film. Let's just say it was a little too much for her. There was the first half I thought was sad but doable sad. The second half gets a little next level sad past that. But I mean, if we're talking frank here, I have some issues with the film, which are like this whole movie's sadness. I mean, well, I can't say the whole movie's because obviously the context of what the event is here we're looking at, but they just had the one aunt that was like such a bitch. And I was like, if they hadn't had that one relative be that one way, like they would have made it through this. And then I don't know. It's just a weird way to.
That's tragedy.
Actually kind of a common theme in a lot of Japanese fiction, where if children are orphaned, the family members who they go to for help, when they finally find someone willing to take them in, they are usually viewed as a significant burden. It's like a common thread I've seen in multiple stories, not just
if
one.
They're family specifically.
Yeah, well, it doesn't seem to matter if it's family members or it's rare to see strangers willing to take in children that are not related to them, at least in the Japanese films.
It's interesting because I just picture the Japanese society as like such a rationing culture, like literally with their supplies and like making things stretch and making ends meet. And like, it was just weird that like,
I mean, that's probably why they're seen as a burden though.
If they had, but if, I don't know, it just seemed backwards to the whole philosophy. Like, we'll stretch this out so everybody can last as long as they can. They're like, no, you're terrible. Go die.
Yeah. And I don't know if the examples of this I've seen have been kind of exaggerations or caricatures, or if that's how things actually are. Because most of what I've seen where this is depicted has been in fiction. So I don't know if I should take it with a grain of salt or if this is actually how orphans are treated in Japan.
I imagine there's probably some basis for that if it is that common.
If you are one of our Japanese listeners, please let us know if this is accurate or not.
But every depiction of an orphan I've seen in like a realistic setting, or even like not even all that realistic, but anything even tangentially related to the world that it is, the world that we have, I should say. Every depiction of orphans I've seen in Japanese film, literature, what have you, has been tragic.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, so this isn't like out of the ordinary, at least as far as I understand it.
Okay. Did the older brother just die because he was like basically just broken himself at that point?
I think so. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
He's just like starving and.
Well, he goes and buys like a shit ton of food. So like he had a million things to eat at that point, but I guess burning your little sister will do that to you though.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe he died of heartbreak.
I did really like the storytelling style with like the ghost form kind of watching the living form. I thought that was really cool in the movie.
Yeah.
The shading and that was kind of neat.
I mean, I don't know. I can say with some confidence that it is literally the saddest movie I've ever seen. I was talking to Alexis about this earlier. Like the closest comparison that jumps to my mind is Schindler's List, which we actually watched recently. But at least Schindler's List is like somewhat optimistic because I mean, even though there's the scene at the end where he breaks down because he could have saved more people, like he still saved over 1,000 people. And like it ends with talking about their descendants and, future. Grave of the Fireflies is just real fucking sad.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it depends how you're measuring sadness because that's Schindler's List is another one.
I mean, obviously, obviously they're both tragic and like very heavy, but I just feel like for me, Grave of the Fireflies is like that much heavier because, there's really, I mean, I guess you could say the ending where their spirits are reunited is like kind of possibly hopeful or, beautiful, but
otherwise it's pretty bleak.
Yeah, it's super bleak.
I mean, all I'm going to say on that comparison is I have shown Schindler's List 30 times in school and I cry every time at that. And I did not cry at this. It's got maybe a smidge.
Ooh, man.
Maybe a smidge.
You're a monster.
Speaking of, how about that last scene? What's going on in that last scene? The little girl dies and then she gets up and runs over to her brother and she's like, we're together.
Yeah.
That's her spirit, I'm pretty sure.
But he dies after that. So how does that work?
It's Lost rules where no matter when you die, you just end up in the same place at the same time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like I said, it's been
Anyway.
about 6 years since I've seen this. I don't quite remember the chronology of each part of it, but yeah.
I mean, I will say, like I said at the beginning, it's a fantastic movie.
Mhm.
It's very highly regarded. It's consistently named among the best war films of all time, like regardless of, media. It's also very commonly very near the top of lists of the best animated films of all time.
Mhm.
I think it is widely regarded to be Takahata's masterpiece. I know Hayao Miyazaki has said that he thinks that it was Takahata's, masterpiece, kind of crowning achievement.
Well, it's a good film for
Yeah,
sure.
it's a really good film. It's just damn it. I mean, I think I am going to watch it again soon. I think I'm going to have to put Alexis through it because she's never seen it. But anyway,
That's
Could
true
have
love,
could have
right?
used more Vanderbeek. Just saying.
if you're
Could have used
if
more
you're out
Vanderbeek.
there and you have not seen this one, definitely watch it. But just be warned that you might need to have box tissues nearby.
I will
Yeah.
say, and this is going to be a dissenting viewpoint because I also had this somewhere towards the middle of my pack. Spoiler alert, but I don't know. It felt like they pulled the emotional strings unpurposefully at parts in the film. I don't know. That's just me, but anyway.
Okay.
You could say it's a tragedy, but like there's other decisions that could have been made.
Yeah. Well, you're entitled to be wrong.
That's fine.
Moving on the other half of our double feature is a very, very maybe polar opposite end of the spectrum is My Neighbor Totoro. This is Hayao Miyazaki's next film after Castle in the Sky. It is perhaps his most famous film. Certainly the character of Totoro is iconic.
Mhm.
It like immediately became the mascot for Studio Ghibli. And all of their films thereafter, you'll see the Studio Ghibli logo has Totoro on it.
Yeah.
This is just a beautiful movie. I'm just going to say that. This is a movie about a family. It's two young girls and their father move into a new home in the countryside, and their mother is in a hospital. She has some sort of illness, which they don't think they ever actually name in the movie. But it's the father and the two girls are settling into this new house, and the girls keep seeing hints that there might be something a little supernatural or out of the ordinary going on. And eventually they encounter this creature that they call Totoro, which is, I believe the translation is troll, or it's like a type of troll in Japan. But in the movie, they refer to it as a forest spirit. And over the course of the movie, they just kind of have various adventures where they're continuing to try to settle into their new home and dealing with some issues of, wanting to have their mom come home, but she's sick, and the kind of stress and trauma around that. And their adventures with the forest spirits kind of help them overcome their fears and learn to kind of grow up a little bit and accept things, I think. I don't want to talk too much about this movie right now, but what do you guys have to say about it?
Well,
Go ahead.
okay. I like Totoro. It's a charming film. It's adorable. It's as with most Ghibli movies, it's beautiful in terms of presentation and
I can tell by your tone that I'm going to fight you at some point.
Well, it's friends occasionally not disagreeing. So, but I do kind of look at My Neighbor Totoro as like McDonald's in a way. It's comforting.
My God,
I'll turn. There are times I'm like, I'm really in the mood for McDonald's, or I'm really in the mood for My Neighbor Totoro, but it's filling. It gets the job done. But underneath it all, there's not really much in the way of a story. Yes, yeah, there's the thing with the mother being sick, but pretty much you can boil it down to family moves to new home. Mother is sick in the background, and you don't really hear about that again much until the end of the film. Otherwise, the entire plot is magical creatures enter the picture, hijinks ensue. And that's kind of it. And like I said, that's delightful. The interactions the kids have with Totoro and the other forest spirits are they're a joy to watch, but there's not much substance there, is honestly the way I feel about it. It's still a very enjoyable film, but it's I feel that there are other Ghibli films that offer more. So I can just see Joe stewing with rage right now.
Cody, do you want to join Justin in the wrong club?
The wrong club. This one, I don't actually know what the first one we watched is. I have a feeling it wasn't this one. I think I know which one it might have been, which is not on the list yet, but coming up here. But this is a family favorite of ours for sure, from when the kids were both small, especially Cameron, and obviously our cat's named Totoro, wherever he's at, being a jerk right now probably. So this is one that means a lot to us. I'm pretty sure I can say this is, again, using the dubbing here, the best thing either of the Fanning girls has ever done on their entire resume. So
you need to watch The Great on Hulu.
You can fight me on that. That's fine.
Watch The Great on Hulu. It's fantastic.
I do agree with Justin that there's not a huge plot to this one, but
that's why I love it.
That's part of the charm. Joe, I'll play mediator here. That's part of the charm to this one, though. I do feel is it's just wacky, magical hijinks and cat bus. And why does the big Totoro get all the press? How come the little Totoros can't? Are they also Totoros, technically speaking?
I think they are technically forest spirits. So
yeah, they're all kind of a piece, I think.
And then also referring to Joe's shirt that he has on this evening, are there female Totoros? How does this population sustain itself? I'm confused how this works. But anyway, we also have to give a shout out to Frank Welker, everyone's favorite voice actor, as Totoro as well in this one. So there we go.
Yes.
The legend.
I guess I feel like I have to respond now.
Okay.
No, I mean, I kind of, said while Cody was talking there, I think, I agree that there is not much in terms of like conventional plot structure, but that is one of the things that I love about the movie. There's not a conventional villain or, obvious conflict. But I think the fact that the movie still works without that is a testament to its strength. To me, it's all about kind of the subtlety and the relationship between these girls and their father, and like not just, really Totoro. I watched this movie last night, and what struck me is that Totoro and the other forest spirits are barely in it. It's called My Neighbor Totoro, but I would guess that it's a 90-minute movie. I would guess they're maybe in 10 minutes of the entire runtime. And the rest of the time, it's, it really is about this family. The thing that's always struck me about this movie is its portrayal of the father's relationship with his daughters. Because, and especially this is 1988, this is over 30 years ago. You don't often see a depiction of essentially a single father raising daughters where he's not like a bumbling idiot or like doesn't know how to deal with these girls, or he's like from the start, like he's a capable, caring father. And like one thing that stood out to me last night when I was watching it is when the daughters first tell him that they encountered this Totoro creature, he doesn't say like, that's silly, that's stupid, or like he doesn't act like he doesn't believe them. He says, oh, you must have encountered one of the forest spirits, and the reason we can't see them right now is because we can only see them when they want us to. Like he has this, gentle, like beautiful relationship with his daughters. And I feel like that's something that you don't really see depicted very often. Especially in a movie from so long ago. So I just, to me, it works on multiple levels, and I don't think you really need to have a villain of any, like a conventional villain. Really the villain of the piece is just kind of the girls' concern for their mother and their kind of fear of the unknown. And I think ultimately what ends up happening is that their encounters with these creatures kind of help them overcome those fears, like I said before. But to me, it's just, kind of a calm, meditative, beautiful work of art. And it's unlike anything else I've ever seen. And it's largely because of that structure, because it doesn't feel the need to kind of, cling to conventional narrative devices.
Okay.
Can we just talk about how when May crawls on him in the middle of the woods, he's like 20 times her size, and the bus stop, he's like twice as big?
He's a magical creature, Cody.
I'm just
Yeah,
asking.
I think he can kind of change size to some extent.
So then the two little ones from our earlier conversation may not be the little ones.
That's true. They could
be
maybe they
huge
can do
normally.
that too.
Interesting. Okay.
Anyway, we should probably get a move on here because we only have like 20 more movies to talk about.
Yeah, we better speed this up.
All right, Kiki's Delivery Service. Someone else go.
I'll take point on this one. So basic plot synopsis. So this is another one that's set in kind of modern times, maybe not present day, but within spitting distance. Kiki is a young witch in training, and she's part of a world where it seems like at first witches aren't really burn them at the stake kind of things. They seem initially to be kind of like an accepted part of how things are. Like they're out there, they're not evil, they're not inherently malicious, they're just people with powers. And according to tradition, when a witch turns 13, they have to set off on their own, find a town that doesn't have a witch, and offer up their services to gain experience, to learn where they fit in the grand scheme of things, and to kind of make their own way in the world. So Kiki is just turning 13. She sets off into the world at large and finds it to be a different place than she imagined. She's not really all that skilled at anything except flying, so she ends up employing her services as a delivery girl for a bakery. And as the story goes on, things happen in her life and she starts to lose her powers. And it's a shocking feeling for her because that's kind of all she's built herself around. This is what she does, this is who she is, and suddenly it's gone. And when I first watched this a while ago, and it struck me as, okay, it's like a coming of age story where you go out into the world for the first time, you find your own way, you struggle a bit, but eventually you find your own way and move on. And I'm not going to talk a whole lot about this one right now, but I will say, watching it again more recently, it has a different meaning than it initially did when I watched it way back when. And it's whimsical at times, it's kind of heartbreaking at times if you really read into it. And it's one that a lot of people are familiar with, but don't really. But I don't think it's one that's gotten as much exposure as, say, My Neighbor Totoro or some of the ones we'll talk about a bit later. But yeah, this one I do enjoy quite a bit, and I think it deserves to be watched by more people. So.
I can't speak to the Japanese version of this one, but I know this is one of my daughter's favorite films in the series, especially because of Gigi the cat, who's voiced by Phil Hartman, the late Phil Hartman in the American version, and he's just a sarcastic bastard like he is and was in real life. So,
from what I understand, I think he actually ad-libbed a lot of his work in that movie. Which
can you imagine?
I mean, usually I would frown upon that with like a Studio Ghibli dub, but I definitely make an exception for him.
I'm sure Disney was like, here's the lines, and he was like, you want me to spill this martini? Here's what I'm gonna do. Let's just do this. This is, I don't know, to me this is I enjoy this one. I had not seen this one, oddly enough, the full way through until 2 days ago. I think I watched this one.
Wow.
But I'm interested to hear what Justin has on this one later, because essentially to me it's side quest the movie and not really all that fun. So
yeah, honestly, I have to say Justin actually, I mean, I'm assuming you're going to say a lot more later, but you have me regretting not rewatching this one for this podcast. I've seen it a couple times. It's been several years since the last time I saw it. I just remember I enjoyed it. I thought it was a cute, fun movie. I liked Phil Hartman as the cat, but
oh, did you now?
it never really struck me as being, anything super impressive or special, but I'm very curious what your sort of updated read on it is. So I'm excited to get to that later.
Cool.
So next on the list is one that I'm guessing none of us have watched, but I could be wrong. It is Isao Takahata's 1991 film Only Yesterday.
Nope.
Not familiar at all.
Nope. My brief understanding is that it is kind of a more adult, more grounded movie that is just kind of like nostalgia. It's someone going home and kind of reconnecting with some people from some like figures from their past. I think maybe there's some romance there, but it sounds like more of kind of like just a like adults, maybe slightly melodramatic movie. I might watch it in the future just because I feel like I have gotten more intrigued by Takahata's work as the years have gone by. But the next one that I know, at least I have seen, is 1992, Hayao Miyazaki's next film, Porco Rosso.
I've also seen this one.
Cody? No?
It's the one I got from the library and just did not get around to.
This is, I think, maybe one of his more underrated movies. Also, maybe one of his more mature movies.
Yeah.
It is, yet again, features airplanes and war. And I think it's post-World War One. It's the main character is the titular Porco Rosso, who is a fighter pilot who has a curse put on him that turns him into a pig. And he's still a fighter pilot, so he's literally like this pig walking around upright and flying airplanes and
smoking cigars,
and drinking, and it's kind of like a film noir, like slash fighter plane movie.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really all you need to know about the plot. I think we can maybe talk about this later, but we talked about how like Totoro doesn't have like an actual villain. One thing that has struck me, especially during this rewatch, is that even the movies that have villains, they're very rarely conventional villains, in the sense where it's like mustache twirling evil for the sake of evil. Like usually, even if there is an obvious villain, they're still at least somewhat sympathetic. I mean, in this movie, the villain is basically fascism. I think it's kind of set as Italy is kind of gearing up to like head towards fascism in World War II. So they're chasing after the main character because he's anti-fascist. And my favorite line from the movie, at one point he says, "I'd rather be a pig than a fascist."
Yes.
But I think often what we see, especially in the movies that have in Miyazaki's movies that have war in the backdrop, is that war is the villain. There's usually not like a concrete like evil character or
Yeah. At least not one that's definitively evil.
Yeah. Usually there's some nuance there, and you can kind of sympathize with them. Anyway, I really like this movie. I think it is kind of underseen and underappreciated. The English dub features Michael Keaton as the main character, which is pretty great. But it's a lot of fun. That's all I can really say. It's a lot of fun. I mean, I wouldn't say it's high art, but I think it does have some things to say. I'm
intrigued. I'll probably keep the copy I have here and give it a watch at some point coming up.
Yeah, I would definitely.
I didn't realize Michael Keaton was in the movie, which is mixed feelings for me, but we'll
I mean,
he's great. Some other time. Well, he was great till he ruined Batman, but other than that.
I thought you were going to say until he ruined Jack Frost.
Oh. He owns that role. Don't kid yourself.
Do you have anything to say about Porco Rosso, Justin?
I've only seen this movie once, years and years ago on like Turner Classic Movies or something, randomly one evening, and I remembered enjoying it a fair amount. It's one I'd like to revisit at some point, but I don't have a subscription to HBO Max, and I don't think my library has it. So, but maybe if the Blu-ray is ever on sale, I'll pick it up. But I do remember enjoying the heck out of it. I remember there being a few decent like action scenes, which is something that not all the movies have. So that was a nice a nice treat as well. But yeah, it's well animated. It's got a good, again, anti-war message that we see a fair amount in these, and it's just a fun time. Yeah.
Yeah, there are some great dogfighting sequences, and I mean, this is maybe the first time that Miyazaki's love of planes is like on full display. I mean, we have certainly seen, various flag machines in some of his other movies up to this point, but this is like obvious. This movie makes it obvious that it's like a borderline fetishization of airplanes.
Yeah.
Like, there are a lot of like just close-ups, and like it's just crazy. I mean, I should say his father actually owned a company that made parts for airplanes in Japan prior to World War II. So that's where Miyazaki's kind of fascination with airplanes comes from. He literally grew up around it, and apparently it just was something that always kind of captured his imagination. And I mean, that's, something that we're definitely going to see coming up again. So the next movie is 1993 Ocean Waves, which I believe this one was actually a made for TV movie. So I don't even know if it's really available outside of Japan. I'm not sure if that's part of the G Kids deal or anything, but I don't think any of us have seen that.
No.
That one is directed by Tomomi Mochizuki. So, I mean, most of the Studio Ghibli movies are directed either by Hayao Miyazaki or Isao Takahata, but there are other directors in the company who, I think most of them, started working under the sort of two masters, and were given, shots at directing their own films at various points. So the next one after that in 1994 is Takahata's next movie, Pompoko. I think I am the only one who's seen this recently. Is that right?
Yeah, I've seen it a while ago, and I remembered enjoying it. But yeah, it's been a good number of years at this point.
Haven't seen it.
All right, I'll kind of walk us through this. I'll just say this movie rules. Like, this movie it's something else. You guys need to watch it. This movie is about a group of tanuki, which are Japanese raccoon dogs. And in Japanese folklore, they are believed to have various magical and mystical powers. And this is Takahata now, but this is a very strong environmentalist movie. The basic premise of the movie is that there's this sort of tribe of tanuki that has been around for millennia. And I think it starts in the 1960s. And they live just outside of Tokyo. I could be wrong about that, but
that sounds right.
They live just outside of a Japanese city that is like suddenly expanding like crazy. And so their forest is being threatened, and there's more and more development going on. And they actually try to use their powers to scare the humans away, is like kind of the basic premise of the movie. And I will not reveal whether or not they're successful, but I mean, one of the powers they have is the ability to change shape. So, they can turn into like different monsters, or even like take on the guise of humans and just wreak chaos that way. Another one of the powers that the male tanuki specifically have, and this is part of Japanese folklore, is that they have testicles that in this movie they can like use their, in the dub so in the English dub that I watched, they don't refer to them as tanuki, they call them raccoons, and they refer to their testicles as their raccoon pouches.
And I
But did you
swear,
say there was magic sacks or something, Justin, in the one you watched?
I think it was magical bags. I don't
Magical
know.
bags.
Yeah.
But
I don't know
yeah,
if it was a different translation, but yeah, that's what I remember.
at various points in the movie, they can like stretch their magical bags out and like transform them into different things. They use them as like parachutes to float down. In one sequence, they like expand them to be really big and literally use them to like bludgeon their enemies with. So it's a whole lot of ball action going on.
Yeah.
To the wall.
This movie's ridiculous. It is like, I think it's the funniest Studio Ghibli movie, at least of the ones I've seen. It kind of leans into the ridiculousness, at least to a certain extent. There's a lot of good jokes in it as well, like intentional jokes. It also has a great message. I mean, that's part of why I think it's such a fun movie, is that, you know, it's silly, but it also has this great environmentalist message, and also does have the heart and like hits you with the emotions that a lot of the other Ghibli movies have. So I mean, Cody, I would recommend you check it out. I don't know how you feel about the kids and the magic sacks or magic pouches, but
It's cultural.
it is cultural. I mean, you could explain that as part of the Tanuki thing, but I
Yeah.
think they would probably enjoy it. I mean, Justin, I'd recommend revisiting it.
Yeah, it's fun.
I had seen it like several years ago, but I was kind of surprised at how much I enjoyed it when I watched it the other day.
Yeah. Whereas I haven't seen it in a good number of years at this point. And really the main thing I remember about it is it kind of felt like a Japanese version of, there was an old Canadian cartoon called The Raccoons, which had a similar environmental message, industrialization, that sort of thing. And it always kind of struck me as like a Japanese version of that in a way.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I should mention that there are also, there's Tanuki nipple at one point. They're kind of like, they're depicted as these kind of like anthropomorphic, you know, they have some humanoid features. So there's like definitely weird Tanuki boob. Anyway, great for children.
Well,
So the next movie is Whisper of the Heart, which is actually written by Hayao Miyazaki, but not directed by him. That was in 1995. Has anyone seen that movie?
I have.
I also have, but it's been a very long time. So
Yeah.
go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, I have sadly not seen this one, but I've seen the sequel that we'll get to later, and I greatly enjoyed that one.
I'll take point.
Go for it, Cody.
So I watched this afternoon. One of the marathon ones from today. So essentially, I guess from an understand, I first thought these were high school students, but they are middle school students apparently, per Japanese depiction here frequently with the things. But this is basically it's not high school, it's a middle school, kind of a dramedy, I guess, if you want to say, for part
the
of it. The
summary I'm looking at says junior high school.
Yeah, so kind of like we might call like a middle high or junior
Middle
high.
school-ish,
Essentially,
yeah.
this is kind of like boys and girls are starting to have crushes on each other, and that's how this one starts.
Ooh.
And we find out that like the two girls who are friends, one of them is like trying to put the other one up to like ask out this guy that likes her, but then it turns out the boy likes the other girl instead, and there's all this drama, and then she meets this other boy on top of that. But the real cool part of this is she starts checking out all these library books, and everyone she checks out has already been checked out by this other kid. Like no matter which book she is interested in personally, she checks out, and it already has this other name on the old style library card inside the book. And so she's kind of wondering who this is. And then she finds one that this kid didn't check out, and she's all excited because she finally found one this kid didn't check out. And it turns out that particular book was donated by the kid's like grandfather, I believe. So that's where she starts to track down like who this kid is, and turns out he is a kid in her class, in her grade, I should say, not in her class, but goes to her school. And they do not hit it off at first, but then of course, as time goes on, they end up very, very good friends. This one has a lot of cool sub things too. It has like a weird cat that travels through the town that she chases from time to time. And I'm always a sucker for a good cat plot. It has a weird cat statue inside the shop, which I believe makes an appearance later on in this list as well.
Sure does.
And then it has the weird antique shop owner, which has been used in many movies throughout time.
Can I ask a question based on?
Yeah.
I mean, I did see this movie years and years ago, and I remember thinking it was okay. But looking at the summary, does the song "Take Me Home, Country Roads" actually play a major part in this movie?
That song is used the entire movie.
I need to watch this movie
And
again. It's
somehow
amazing.
works. There is a Japanese version of the movie. There's traditional lyrics. There's joking lyrics that they make for the school. It is
That's amazing.
just sometimes it's just the tune in the background. Yes,
I'm not even kidding. That fact alone makes me feel like I need to rewatch
I
this
kind of
movie.
thought that was hyperbole, but it is not. It is really used through the whole thing.
That's
So
amazing.
yes, and then essentially she comes out of her shell and becomes a budding writer. She writes the story "Whisper of the Heart," which is where the title of the movie comes from.
Oh.
And the boy that she is in love with goes on to be a violinist, I believe. He's making violins, so he's not a violinist, although he is also, but he is a violin maker as well.
Okay.
And that's kind of where that all ends. Then they magically promise to get married at the end of the story at age 13 or whatever. So. But yeah, it was an enjoyable flick.
Nice. Yeah, I might rewatch that. I mean, I do keep feeling like I should watch or rewatch some of the non-Miyazaki and Takahata Studio Ghibli movies.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm glad to hear that you enjoyed that. I might actually revisit that soon.
Okay.
Next on the list is one that Justin and I have already talked about a little bit, 1997 Princess Mononoke, which is, as Justin mentioned at the beginning, this is kind of the first one that started getting attention for Hayao Miyazaki around the world, especially in the West. This was kind of, it just made a big splash. And, you know, as I mentioned, I'm pretty sure the translation was overseen by Neil Gaiman, so that was a big thing. Does anyone want to take point on kind of leading us through this, or I can stumble through it?
If you don't want to, I can.
Go for it.
Okay. So
you can do it in 200 words or less. I'll be impressed. Go.
Oof, I don't think I can, especially because I just wasted like 15 words. So Princess Mononoke is it's very much a spectacle film. Like everything about it is larger than life. It's just gorgeously animated, gorgeously presented, beautiful music. But the story is it's another environmental piece where it's set in feudal Japan, where industrialization is just starting to take off. So there's iron foundries and firearms are starting to be introduced, that sort of thing. And there's this very, very tenuous, I don't even want to say balance, but this conflict between this encroaching industrialization and the natural world. And the natural world in this case isn't just like fairly benign things like tanuki and whatnot, but actual like essentially forest gods and demons and things that live in the old woods, as it were. And as the story even kicks off, you're seeing that the effects of industrialization, firearms in particular, are actually corrupting these forest spirits and turning them into something absolutely horrible and horrifying. And the corruption can spread if you get touched or attacked by one of these things. And our main character, well, one of our main characters, Prince Ashitaka, I think is his name. Yep. He fends off an attack by a boar that has been corrupted by, the encroaching industrialization and all that. And it fends it off, manages to take it down, but not before he himself gets the corruption spread to him. So his arm is now essentially possessed by this. You could call it just an effect of modern civilization, but it's really more of an embodiment of ill will, of greed, of hatred. It's just a negative aura, kind of. And it's he's told by the people in his village that it's eventually it will overtake him and he'll either die or he'll turn into something that's so bad he'll wish he was dead. So he sets off to try and essentially overcome fate and find a way to cure himself by basically seeking out the big spirit of the forest and to try and seek its aid and lift the curse from him. Along the way, he gets embroiled in wars over territories between various feudal lands and cities and things like that. And he's just trying to get himself fixed, but he realizes as he goes that it's not that simple, that even if he fixes himself, this whole mess is still going on in the world around him. And eventually that all comes to a head, and it's, well, I don't want to like spoil the ending or anything, but it's there's a lot of layers to it, but when you get down to it, it's a very strong, just pro-environmental message. Like, we need to figure out a way to, yeah, civilization is going to move ahead, but we need to find a way to do it that's not going to just destroy the world in its wake. It's a good movie. As an introduction to Studio Ghibli, I think there's a reason why this is the one that first made a splash in the US, because it just presents everything in a very accessible, very approachable, very digestible way. It's visually striking. It has an easy to follow story, and yet it has an element of mystique to it that can be very good at hooking you in, even if the basic story underneath it all is really, when you get down to it, fairly clean cut. So I don't want to say too much more about it, but it's a good film.
It's all right.
I do feel like well, building off of your the way you said that, I do feel like it is in a way a lesser version of Nausicaa. Like, I feel
that's hilarious, because this is what I was hinting at before when I said that I feel like Nausicaa was done better later.
Yeah, I heard you say that, so I wanted to bring it up now, because yeah, I honestly feel like the world is more realized in Nausicaa, and there's more nuance to it than just I don't know, something about Princess Mononoke. Despite the presentation, it felt more basic in terms of its execution to me. Great film. If I was looking to introduce somebody to this studio, I would almost assuredly pick Princess Mononoke, just because it does make such an impression. But I don't know if I want to delve more into my feelings about it right now, or if I want to wait. But it's up to you guys. If you want, I can continue on, or I can just
hold off. You can share them.
I think you've said enough.
I think you've said enough. I'll just go brief on this one. This is another one I had the DVD of for a long time and really enjoyed. Just love the idea of like the wolves running around with let me get her name right here, San. And this movie has one thing all of the other Studio Ghibli films we've talked about so far does not have.
Is it Gillian Anderson?
It sure is. It sure is. Now, it's a great one though. Visually, this is a really strong one. I mean, a lot of reasons just mentioned there, but it looks clean, it's crisp, it's fun to watch.
It's pretty.
It is pretty.
Yeah, I mean, I love this movie. It may be slight nostalgia bias because it was the first one I saw, but one of the things that I really like about this movie, going back to what we were talking about earlier, as far as villains rarely being one-dimensional in Ghibli movies, we have kind of the ostensible villain of the piece in Lady Eboshi, who is the ruler of Iron Town, where, you know, they're manufacturing all these weapons, and it literally is like a manifestation of industrialization in the middle of this idyllic forest. But she is, you know, multifaceted in that, you know, she employs lepers there and like has pity, and like she clearly cares about these people that are living there and working for her. And you get the sense that she feels like she's doing the right thing.
Yep.
You know, like it's not, she's not being evil for evil's sake. She's not necessarily even acting out of, you know, personal greed. You get the sense that she feels like she's doing the right thing for herself and for her people. So she has a lot of nuance, and I mean that's something that I've always appreciated about this movie.
Rescues all the ladies from the brothels.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you know, her employees are as Cody said, like ladies that were working in brothels and things like that. I mean, ultimately, again, kind of the actual sort of villain of the movie is just like the concept of industrialization, as opposed to, you know, necessarily having this character truly be villainous, like at her core. So I think, I don't know, I don't want to get into it too much longer, but this is the movie that I was kind of suggesting earlier when I said that I felt like Nausicaa was kind of done better later, because I mean, I do enjoy Nausicaa, but I just feel like Princess Mononoke is just a more fully realized version of all that.
Well,
we can debate that later, Justin.
Okay.
We need to get through this.
That's fair, yeah.
So next on the list, 1999, is Takahata's next movie, My Neighbors the Yamadas. Did anyone else check this out?
Have not seen.
I have not seen it either.
I saw this movie years ago, and it's fun. It's a fun, very light movie. It's basically a series of vignettes centered around this family called the Yamadas, and it's really just kind of various slices of life of this family. You know, showing the parents how they're interacting with their kids and interacting with each other. There's a lot of humor throughout it. It is very kind of lighthearted. Not a whole lot to it. It's not very substantive. There really, you know, is not much drama or tension or anything like that. It's really just kind of a, oh, that was nice kind of thing. So, I mean, I would recommend watching it. You know, it's definitely enjoyable, but I don't think it's, you know, necessarily anywhere near Ghibli's best work. So we don't need to talk about it too much.
Okay.
Next on the list, 2001, widely considered to be Miyazaki's masterpiece. It's the movie that he won the Academy Award for, and that is Spirited Away. Anyone want to lead us through this? Cody? I mean, I can if you don't want to, but
I could too if you guys
I'm
want.
not going to take point because this is one that I wanted to rewatch in a perfect world this week, and I didn't get a chance to rewatch it. I've seen this one many times. That's why I felt safe not rewatching it, but it's not fresh in my mind.
I'm going to try to keep it brief just because we need to get through this. But, and I mean,
Sure.
I'm assuming this is one that most people have seen who are even vaguely interested in Studio Ghibli. I mean, after Princess Mononoke, like this is, you know, it won the Academy Award. It had theatrical releases. It was really out there. But basically the premise is there's a girl named Chihiro who is going with her parents. They're moving to a new town, and she's kind of like nervous about it. It seems like at the beginning. It starts with them in the car, and they stop at what I believe it's like an old abandoned amusement park they find. And they're kind of walking around, and they come across a food stall that has a bunch of food in it. And it's strange because there's no one around. Like it looks like this place has been abandoned for a long time, but all this food is like fresh and looks good. And instead of really asking any questions, her parents just sit down and start eating.
As people do.
As you know, like you do, just eat mystery food that's been sitting there unattended. So Chihiro starts walking around and exploring this place, and she ends up in going to this, she finds a bathhouse. I'm kind of reading out plots over here. I'll just go through it further faster. Sure. Long story short, Chihiro ends up kind of stumbling into the spirit realm. After her parents eat all the food, she discovers that they've been transformed into giant pigs, and she's kind of horrified and like doesn't really know what to do. And she encounters this boy named what's his name? I just Haku, who ends up kind of like guiding her to try to keep her out of trouble. She gets stuck in this bathhouse, which it turns out is like a bathhouse for the gods and like, you know, other spirits. And the owner of the bathhouse is Yubaba. And one thing she does, which is like kind of steeped in folklore, is she takes Chihiro's name. or she takes one of the characters from her name so that
Mhm.
her name becomes Sen, and she forgets her true name. So she kind of has like a curse placed on her where she's stuck there, and basically the rest of the movie is her trying to figure out how she can get out of this spirit realm and hopefully get back home. I don't want to, to say too much else would be kind of spoilery for anyone who may not have seen it, but again, I'm
Mhm.
sure most people have. But I mean, this, like I said, this is widely considered to be Miyazaki's masterpiece. It's a fantastic movie.
Mhm.
I really like it's the way that it draws so much on Japanese folklore, the depictions of the various kind of deities and spirits in the bathhouse. One thing that we see fairly often in Miyazaki's movies, and one of the things I like My Neighbor Totoro so much is this sense of like something more lurking just beyond. This is like a girl, leading an ordinary life who like just stumbles into this whole spirit realm situation. Justin, were you going to say something about that?
Yeah, actually, I don't have many notes leading into this, but this is one of the notes I had. So I do have a real fondness for Japanese folklore, and a big portion of that is there's this concept of konoyo and anoyo. Konoyo is like it's the world around us. It's our cities, our workplaces, the people that we see every day. It's what's normal. And then there is also anoyo, which it literally translates as over there, and that can mean another country, but in a more general sense, it means anything that's not part of the world that you know. It's kind of a step sideways, and there over there is just over there. Sometimes it's you take the wrong turn, you're in a noyo, and that this movie really encapsulates that really well. Like Sen and her family do end up just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and suddenly they've left Konoyo where they've always belonged and ended up over there. And this is just a perfect depiction of that. And Spirited Away, as you said, it's kind of the most quintessentially Japanese of the Ghibli films that I've seen, and I love that it takes that concept and just does it perfectly. So, but yeah, that whole idea of there being another world of spirits and gods and demons, just a little bit offset from ours, is a very common thing in Japanese folklore. So I just
Awesome,
wanted to
that's
touch on
cool.
that. Yeah,
No, that's great. Thanks for that.
sure.
Yeah, I
Cody,
mentioned I didn't get a chance to rewatch this one like I mentioned, but I know there's a lot of things I enjoy about this. It's kind of like the crazy Japanese mythology hotel. Like you never know who's going to walk through the door and what kind of character you're going to see and what
that
they're.
radish god though.
It's just fun. It's kind of funny too. You see a little bit of the Disney influence in this one here too, with like her mom and dad are played by Michael Chiklis and Lauren Holly, who are not like AA named actors, but like probably have 10 lines in the movie, and they went out and got those two people to play those roles. And John Ratzenberger is in here, of course, as well, to go full Disney Pixar on us here.
Yeah, I think after Spirited Away is when Disney sort of went after the Ghibli catalog. I could be wrong, but I think that is when they kind of like scooped up the rights and they went back and did these kind of high quality dubs of all the Ghibli films, with various celebrities.
I think the character, I think you guys could argue with me if you don't agree, but I think the character who has become kind of the pop culture sensation from this movie is probably No Face, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, I would
It's
agree with that.
kind of the iconic used on
Yeah.
merchandise and stuff now.
A close second would be the Soot Sprites,
Yes.
the little puffballs. Yeah.
Which we kind of see versions of those in different, like even in Totoro, there's like the Soot Gremlins.
Yeah.
And that's another thing is that you do see kind of Easter eggs like and recurring character designs popping up in the different Ghibli movies. Like there's actually a character in what movie was that? One of the movies I just watched this week. Was it maybe Castle in the Sky? There's a character whose design looks almost exactly like Kamaji the Boilerman from Spirited Away.
Hmm.
He's got like the little round black glasses and giant mustache.
Could be.
But you see, some similar character designs. There's also one of the movies had kind of an older woman who looked a lot like Yubaba as well in one of the earlier movies. Anyway,
well, in one we're going to get to, there's another character who looks a bit like her too.
Yeah.
But anyone else have anything to say about Spirited Away? It's a classic. It's iconic. I mean, I don't know how much we can really say.
Yeah, great film.
Oof, we have a lot of Studio Ghibli that we've covered so far, gentlemen. I think we need to take a pause here, and we're going to come back next week with the second half of our chronological review of Studio Ghibli, as well as reveal our top 5 for each person. We'll see, do we have some commonalities, or do we have 5 different movies that we chose for our top 5? Till next week, we will see you all again on Fond.